we once again have to talk about Tucker Carlson. Just out there thinking, you know what would be fun? Doing Russian propaganda. Because why not? And this interview was particularly sickening that he did. Here's the title of it. Then we'll go through some key clips. Breaking news. Russia will nuke Germany and the UK if Ukraine war continues, warns top Putin advisor. And I'll give you some specifics in a second, but here was the promo. What would it take for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Russia? Oh, I can answer that. Stop invading sovereign countries for one. Now, it gets a little bit complicated when we start being interested in that, but that's the whole ideological alignment that we've been warning of for a long time from these MAGA figures. Putin advisor Sergei Karaganov gives us the Russian perspective. Watch live tonight, and we will. Not live, but I'll show you some of what happened. Now, what's interesting is you'll hear Tucker do this thing. Actually, let me show you the ending first, where he goes, I just wanted to get the Russian perspective on what's going on. After this top Putin advisor, Sergey, was talking about how, if this keeps escalating, we'll just go take Europe off the map. Oh yeah, Europe's the cause of all evils. And then Tucker's like, Putin, whoops. Tucker's like, wow, okay. His mouth's half open like most of the interview. Well, I just want to get the Russian perspective. Okay, when did you get the Ukrainian perspective? You never seem interested in that, do you, buddy? You interviewed Putin, now you're interviewing this guy. You never interviewed a Ukrainian voice to really lay out that perspective, which is the correct perspective because they're the ones being invaded. But here's how the interview ended.
I think it's important for American policymakers and the American citizenry, the country, to understand the Russian perspective. And I'm grateful that you gave it to us, Mr. Karaganov. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, you seem to only ever want to get the Russian perspective on their offensive, murderous invasion of Ukraine. And let me just tell you, if you think there's some big secret that we would understand about why the Russian government, why Putin is doing this, that would make it all make sense and moral, but we just never hear them out, well, let's see. Because the more I hear from this guy, Karaganov, the less moral he seems. And Tucker seems incapable of pushback.
Anymore.
When you say everyone knows that the Russian government, if pressed, would use nuclear weapons against Europe, do you mean that, is my question. And do you think that the Europeans understand that?
Hard-hitting journalism. So you said that if things escalated, you would have to nuke Europe out of existence. I guess just to follow up, do you really mean that? Wow. Do you really mean that? Sergey, you're kind of getting me hot. So tough. Of course, he goes on to be like, yeah. But this is his thesis. Everything's justified because Europe in his mind is the cause of all evils. While we watch this, please do click the subscribe button. Very simple. Very easy. If you want to support messages like this that actually value truth a heck of a lot more than the guy doing this. And the other guy.
The same elites could not comprehend that if war, a real big war, is unleashed in Europe, and sooner or later this war in Ukraine, which we are waging with Europeans, escalates. There will be no Europe. Thanks God we have changed our nuclear doctrine recently our president said he was very cautious and he's a very cautious and very polite man, but he said something very important. He said that if Europe continues and if Europe gets into real direct conflict with Europe, there will be nobody in Europe to talk to. But I hope and I beg and I pray the way I pray that he or us wouldn't have to make this decision. But
so this would be a good time for journalists to go, So you keep talking about if it escalates, we might have to nuke Europe out of existence. And our dear leader Putin, he's so rational and so cautious that I hope he won't have to do that. But if this war continues, then we might have to do it, you know? And for Tucker, I'll play a little further, see if he interjects. But wouldn't a normal journalist go, how could it be Europe or Ukraine possibly escalating when you could just stop invading today? Like, isn't that an interesting question? Oh, you keep talking about this war that's going on and how Europe is escalating by supporting Ukraine. What if you just stopped? Because then it would be over. Ukraine wouldn't then invade Russia. It would be over. Russia's the one continuing it. And as I've said before, wars are very complicated. Propaganda from different sides of a war are pretty complicated. History is complicated. But some things can be simply explained as I just did. And that really is, learn as much as you'd like. For all of the months and years now I've learned about this particular conflict, it still is summed up in the Russian expansionist, invasionist government is trying to do just that. Expand and take over, and Ukraine, a sovereign country, is defending itself. Then you can learn a bunch that just substantiates that. And why that wouldn't be brought up by Tucker? How could you do this weird, Europe might force us into nuking them because they're... Oh, no, you could stop today. You could stop, then it's over. Then there's no escalation.
As I've said before, Europe is the source of the most evils, and it returns to its worst times.
Twice in the past, roughly the past year, the Ukrainians have tried to, at least twice, tried to kill your president, President Putin. What that's my read of it.
Yeah. I'm sure, Tucker, that's your read. If there's a Ukrainian denial, I don't know if he means did he say the government or did he just mean random people? And Russia states something, Tucker goes, I'm going with Putin. And also, what if you ask, what about the attempts against Zelensky's life?
Why do you think they did that? What's the...
That's the question? Why do you think people want to kill Putin? He's only mass slaughtering a bunch of innocent people. Why do people want to kill Putin? So the two powerful follow-up questions so far from Tucker are, you say you might have to nuke Europe. Really? That's one. Second one is, why do they want to kill Vlad? Seems so mean of them.
Thinking there.
We don't need to hear that. We don't need to hear it. But did you hear a big important part of this is he repeats the Putin advisor, Europe is the source of evil. So with that characterization and it not being pushed back against with Tucker, despite a country in Europe being currently invaded by the country that the Putin advisor is representing, how that frames his argument, I don't know. Instead, they just go on and on. But if you characterize it that way, then whatever is going to be spouted off by this Putin advisor will seem justified because we've all accepted the premise that their enemy is just the source of all evil, so they can really do whatever they want. Moving forward.
Be killed. Well, the opportunity should be used, but I'm pretty sure that their problem is much deeper. And it is not Ukraine, it is not Zelensky and whomever. It is that Europe is again returning to its worst. And that is the source of all evil in the history of humanity.
So why do you think
Europe is the source of all evil in the history of humanity? We're going to get to one of the things he cites to substantiate that, and we'll see. We'll see how credible this guy is.
I mean, I think from an American perspective, it's very obvious that European leaders are focused on Russia in the big countries, Germany, France, Great Britain. The leadership of all three countries is focused on Russia as the threat. Why do you think that is?
No, it is very simple. I mean, I'm a founder of Institute of Europe, and I used to be a Europhile 40 years ago. And then I learned them better, and I became highly skeptical. They are complete failures on all counts. I mean, moral, political, economic, etc. Europe is going down. Also, they are unable now to exploit the world and to suck the rent from the world which they have been getting due to their military preponderance over the last 500 years.
So it goes on and rambles for a while. But did you hear the question again? Because we know what the Putin advisors are going to say. We've heard it a million times. It's been debunked a million times. But Tucker, an American, who has previously stated he would root for Russia in the case of a war, and that's what he's been doing, who's taken trips to Russia to be like, look, oh my gosh, the bread here smells so good. Oh, milk is so good. It's the absolute disgrace that he is to prioritize whatever weird ideological affinity he has for the Russian government above American patriotism and above the facts for sure. And you can see it in that question. Why do you think that European leaders are so opposed to Russia? What about Tucker? What about asking it actually, don't even ask it that way. What about you just know that would be a ridiculous question because you know the answer, which is, I wonder why European countries are concerned about a European country being invaded from a regime that has ambitions beyond that into other European countries. I think it's pretty clear why they have a fixation on Russia that's invading their European counterpart. Then we get to this.
Hopefully, in a limited sense.
It's interesting that you say their leaders no longer fear nuclear weapons. You would think everyone would fear nuclear weapons given their destructive capacity. Why would any person not fear the threat of a nuclear attack?
This is not even journalism. You could bring up so many interesting points to confront a Putin advisor with. You could bring up so many questions that would lead to potentially confrontational or even just unique answers. It is not journalism or whatever, or the sign of integrity for every one of your questions to be essentially, you believe this, so true, but, and also, really? That's all the questions. You said that they don't fear nuclear weapons. That's crazy. Really? It's pathetic. You're not even trying a little bit to confront this person who's representing the regime that's responsible for this war. You're not even slightly interested in that. So then who is watching this like, right on, Tucker, thanks for giving me this perspective. Just go to Russian state TV and you can get this perspective. Just go straight to watch videos of Putin, you can get this perspective. This isn't doing anything. We're not learning anything. Why aren't they? Everyone's afraid of nuclear weapons. And also, Russia's constantly shouting, well, we have nukes, well, we have nukes, well, we have nukes, well, we have nukes. So at some point you have to be like, okay, I don't know what we're supposed to do with that. And we can't keep operating out of fear where we don't uphold any of our values and we don't try to live free lives as countries because you keep shouting you have nuclear weapons and you're going to destroy the whole world with them. Yeah, we have to sometimes assume that you're not really going to do that to move forward with our lives. Then this.
What would happen if your president were to be assassinated by the Ukrainians or Europe or the United States? What would be the next?
Let's hope that would not happen. But then, of course, that would mean that we will punish. Hopefully, not the United States. but Europe will be taken away from the map of the humanity. It should be.
So the question included, what if someone from Ukraine found out a way to assassinate Putin, as I'm sure people are trying to do? And the response is, we would have to take Europe off the map. And Tucker likes to do this thing where he acts like, oh, it's so annoying, where he acts like voices for Ukraine defending themselves are warmongers and are escalatory. Not just going, I don't know, take over that country, slaughter a bunch of people, torture a bunch of people, who cares? Not doing that, in Tucker's estimation, means you're a bloodthirsty warmonger if you just want to give them aid. But whenever the Putin advisor goes, oh, if someone assassinated, he doesn't even necessarily say like a member that's associated with every single European country. He just goes, maybe some Ukrainian rebel, maybe someone fed up within Russia, well, whatever. Putin gets assassinated, yeah, we'd probably nuke all of Europe. Is the argument there. And those people who started the war, who constantly escalate, who are violating European countries' airspace, pushing the limits, who don't respect the sovereignty of the people around them and choose war over peace, those aren't the warmongers to Tucker. It's the people wanting peace through defense. This is why I dislike Tucker Carlson so much, or one of the reasons. There's many reasons. But a lot of people lately are like, I don't know, Tucker says some things that kind of hit. No, he's such a ridiculously uninformed in some ways, but intelligent in other ways, manipulative, dishonest, and a tool, a propagandist. And then this is how the interview started, where you'll hear some of the substantiation, in air quotes, from the Putin advisor as to why whatever they want to do to Europe, against Europe, is justified because it's the source of all evil. Let's see how he substantiates that.
Mr. Karaganov, thank you very much for joining us.
That's right.
How do you believe this war will end?
This war could and should be ended not only when Russia achieves total defeat of Europe, hopefully without eliminating Europe. We are fighting not Ukraine.
Wait. Hear that, please. I want to send this to every single one of the people who glaze Tucker, and I know don't believe this. Think about how many people go, yeah, Tucker, he's anti-war. And I'll play you clips of whenever he calls out Trump over being too pro-war, and that's fine. But he's not for Russia. Oh, he's just against the Western warmongers who are using Ukraine as a proxy war, right? You've heard this so many times. They act like weird apologia for Russia is how you get yourself out of war, despite Russia starting the war. And then he doesn't even bat an eye when his new buddy says the way out of this war is not don't expand NATO or stop messing with whatever dumb argument they'll try out. It's the complete victory over Europe. Okay, well then every time Tucker laughed at people for saying this is more than just, even though this would be perfectly worthy of wanting to defend them by itself, but it's about even more than Ukraine and a much broader invasionist ideology that does not respect sovereignty, does not respect the rights of European countries, and thus stopping this in Ukraine is pivotal globally. And he goes, oh, what? You think he's going to invade more than Ukraine? Ah! And then this guy goes, yeah, we need to completely defeat all of Europe. I'm not saying that means they plan on taking over all of Europe, but that is the wording that he chose to use, that this is, in his mind, a proxy war with the United States. And that's, or not with the United States, with Europe. And then sometimes, depending on who runs our country, us. And so it is them who is continuing, obviously, an exacerbating war. And Tucker doesn't care. So he's not consistent on not wanting war. He's not consistent on caring about human lives. It just depends on what aligns with his ideology, which is a confusing one to try to track because it flip-flops all the time because he doesn't actually believe anything. He's just a grifter.
Defeat of Europe, hopefully without eliminating Europe. We are fighting not Ukraine, not Zelensky and the like. We are fighting again their Europe, which has been their source of all ills and all sources of evil in the history of humanity, of 2 world wars.
So, going back for a second, look at Tucker when he says, these are the people who used to say they wanted to defend Western civilization. And now he's sitting across from a guy who says, Europe's the cause of all evil and all ill in the world. And Tucker goes, yeah. Watch his face.
In the history of humanity, of 2 world wars, Europe has been several times invading us. Last time it was openly in the 41, 45, when 90%, 95% of European countries came here under the banners of Hitler. Now, unbelievably, after all their defeats, they have.
So one of his substantiating points for his enemies, European countries being the source of all evil and ills in the world, is he cites Hitler and the invasion of Russia. Thus saying that whatever they want to do to any European countries justified because, for instance, they are to blame for World War II. Okay. Let me ponder on that for a second. Wait a minute. I seemingly have a little memory from history class about a little country called the Soviet Union or Russia, making an alliance with someone called Hitler and then invading, helping to start World War II, Poland, with the idea of splicing and dicing with Hitler what he takes and what you take. And then ultimately, because Hitler not only was psychotic in all the ways we know, but also was strategically kind of a moron, decided to invade Russia, which then flipped which side Russia was on. But please spare me we can blame all of Europe for World War II because of the actions of Nazi Germany, when you had an alliance with Nazi Germany for a second there, didn't you? Didn't y'all do a coordinated invasion of Poland? Oh, that's exactly one of the things that helped launch us into World War II. Oh, and you switched sides, luckily, because that did help us ultimately defeat Nazi Germany, because Hitler invaded you. Not because you were the epitome of morality. So if you're going to use history in that way to craft this worldview, how about you know a little bit of it? Karaganov? Is that crazy? You're going to bring up Hitler? You don't remember your history with Hitler? And yes, I guess good thing Hitler did invade Russia, because ultimately the series of events led to the defeat of Nazi Germany. But oh baby, that does not substantiate your argument there. So that's a sick person. I do really believe Tucker is a sick person. Obviously the Karaganov is, but Tucker too. And he just nods along. And I find it really disturbing that so many people like this guy.